Okay, we're delighted to have the West LA Veterans Collective back with us to give us an update. Gentlemen, welcome, and have at it.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Hopper. Can everyone hear me? All right, great. Good morning, Chairman Hopper, fellow board members. My name is Brian D'Andrea, Senior Vice President at Century Housing Corporation. So on behalf of the West LA Veterans Collective, thank you very much for inviting us to participate in today's session. We're excited to reintroduce ourselves for those of you that may not have had an opportunity to meet us back in January, and also provide an overview of what we've been up to over the course of the past 8 months. So as you know, the collective was selected by the VA to serve as principal developer back in November of 2018. Our team is comprised of 3 local mission-driven organizations with a long and storied history of working together successfully. These include Century Housing, the organization I represent, US Vets, and Thomas SAFRAN and Associates. And together, we actively develop, manage, and provide supportive services within the housing that we proudly create. Our team is supplemented by a world-class group of consultants, engineers, planners, and designers that we've engaged with. These include Killefer Fleming Architects, City Fabric, and KPFF Consulting Engineers. And I know I speak on behalf of our entire team in sharing with you that we are thrilled and really excited by this opportunity that's before us, and that we also feel the tremendous weight of responsibility that's been entrusted to us by both the VA, our veterans, and the stakeholder community. Our work is fueled by the imperative to address the housing needs of our veterans. As you saw in the most recent homeless count here in LA County, we still have more than 3,800 veterans that are experiencing homelessness on any given night. And as we shared with you in January, we see this as an unacceptable reality and a reality that needs to change. And before us with West LA, we have a tremendous opportunity to really make a difference in the lives of our veterans that are most vulnerable and most in need. Our team's been tasked with creating much more than simply 1,200 homes on the North Campus. We've been tasked with orchestrating the development of a supportive and therapeutic community on the North Campus. And you'll hear more about that later today. And that's a community in which our veterans can grow, can heal, and can thrive. And so as we move forward, we are committed to working with urgency. We're committed to employing best practices in terms of construction and design and operations, and really embracing a collaborative and transparent spirit to expedite the delivery of this community. Our work begins and ends with our veterans. 2 of our 3 organizations in our collective are nonprofits that are presently led by veterans, including Ron Griffith, President and CEO of my organization, Century Housing Corporation, and Steve Peck, President and CEO of US Vets. And interestingly, both of our organizations were founded by Judge Harry Pregerson, himself a wounded World War II veteran whose legacy lives on. Combined, the 3 organizations, we bring decades of experience in housing and serving our veterans, both locally at places like the Villages at Cabrillo and Long Beach, in Inglewood, in Glendale, but also around the country. That rich experience grounds our work in both the needs and the perspective of the veteran. Our teams also bring a wealth of real estate development and relationship experience, having developed more than $1 billion worth of real estate here in Southern California over the course of 4 decades. And the LA market is a market that we know well because all 3 of our organizations are from LA. We're rooted here locally, including Thomas SAFRAN Associates, that's located just a stone's throw away from here at the West LA VA. And what that means is that we're not only deeply accountable to the VA and the veterans we serve, but also to the local communities in which we work and live. And accountability is an incredibly important feature of our team. Later today, we'll be sharing with you how we intend to approach impact and outcomes, both achieving outcomes, capturing outcomes, and reporting on outcomes. And lastly, our collective has rallied around a shared mission. A mission that deeply commits us to the successful transition of the veterans and their families through the provision of service-enriched housing, and promotes recovery, wellness, and a more hopeful future. And those three words, recovery, wellness, and hope, those three words really capture the spirit of this community that we intend to create. And those three words also capture the spirit of the fulfillment of the draft master plan and the promise of the original land conveyance from back in 1887.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Andrew Gross with Thomas SAFRAN Associates. I'm president of the development company. I'm here with Tyler Monroe as well from TSA. He'll be up here in a second. But yeah, just to continue on Brian's really the mission, and now we have the principles. And so it really is to really create community. That is, we all are familiar with this VA and the need to really revitalize it. And there are some central principles that the collective have put forth, which are before you here. One is home. You know, it really is to create a home for these veterans. What's more important, really? And you know, how do you do that? You assemble the services, the amenities, and obviously the housing to do that. We got to nurture. We got to nurture. That's a central guiding principle of the collective as well. And how do you do that? It really is with the supportive services. It's supporting both physically, our veterans physically, as well as emotionally, and also connect them, importantly, with the surrounding community here in Los Angeles. You know, it's to provide opportunity. I think that's self-explanatory, but obviously very important. Not just to provide the housing, but also the future for them to live into to improve lives. It's to restore, that's a guiding principle as well, to restore really the master plan, this VA campus. And it's a great historical asset for not only the VA and the federal government, but also the surrounding community here in Los Angeles. And so restoring it is clearly important. To do it at the super high level, outstanding is the next guiding principle. Everything all these entities do. I think that's why, it's one of the reasons why you selected us, is because we have a really high bar for producing results. And so we appreciate coming here before you to show you what we propose, and also for you to hold us accountable to that high bar. And then sustainability, clearly important in today's world. Strategies, what are the strategies we're going to employ to meet these principles? We are going to establish order. The order is the hierarchy, the sense of hierarchy and orientation and monumentality of the VA. That includes roads and just organization. Harmony is, again, to preserve the architectural heritage of the community and integrate it with new construction. How do you do that at a really sensitive yet really high level? Provide context, connected context. That again is providing context to these physical connections within the VA community, as well as with the surrounding community outside the VA, which includes immediately adjacent here in West Los Angeles, but also broadly to all of Los Angeles. And then it's to build critical mass. We all know the way to do this is first to crawl, then to walk, then to run. That's really our objective as well, is to do the critical mass and to do it as quickly as we may. And then finally, it's create monumental modesty. We understand that it is very important, and we hold that as an important strategy for us, and that is really to enhance the civic design and architecture of the West LA community, again, through the historic context, as well as by providing the new construction, and just being super sensitive to the history of the VA, as well as kind of the objectives going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Tyler Monroe. I'm the Vice President of Development for Tom SAFRAN Associates. So speak a little bit more about how we've continued to refine, or where we've gone after the establishment of our mission statement, our guiding principles, and these urban design strategies that Andrew spoke spoke to a moment ago. We spent a lot of time looking at the documents of the programmatic environmental impact statement, the PEIS, specifically which buildings have been studied as part of it on the existing VA campus to better understand context. So we have taken a strategy of not being presumptuous about what belongs here, but starting with what already exists and spending a lot of time in documentation that's already been created by a wealth of people and organizations that have invested a significant amount of time. So this is a slide to show kind of the preferred alternative in the programmatic environmental impact statement, and those buildings that are in green are those that were studied as part of the PEIS. We then began to map all of the historic buildings that exist in historic areas, also the lawn as well, as it relates to the PEIS and the campus at large, so we can understand how each of these historic structures kind of fit together and kind of the level of monumentality of each one of them. Obviously, historic preservation is of significant importance, and we have a major and significant interest as a collective and a group to adaptively reuse as many of these structures into housing and service space as we may. So we began to look at all of these buildings as well. We then looked to the draft master plan that had been previously provided by those that came before us, started to understand how the various zones were thought of, and then began to layer that information on top of the documentation that was in the programmatic environmental impact PEIS document, as well as the historic tiering, to see whether or not, do we agree or do we not agree with the way these zones were working, and how did they, evolve relative to other data that was there. So this is the one that was in the program, the original draft master plan, and this is kind of the evolution of where we are, which is effectively shows they're the same. So the prior zone plan and where we've kind of come out in terms of the research that we've done on the master plan and on the PEIS and historic structures are really aligned. I'll now hand this over to Mr. Brian DeAndre to talk a little bit more about infrastructure. Now that we get to an idea of holistically or at a high level where we are going on the plan, we can speak a little bit where we are on the infrastructure process.
Thanks, Tyler. Brian DeAndre again. So infrastructure costs and impacts are an ordinary consideration in housing development that we face in our day-to-day work. These systems include storm drains, sewer, electric, gas, water, and transportation infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, etc. As you saw in the final PEIS document, the infrastructure on the North Campus, actually on the entirety of the VA campus, dates back more than a century. Many of those systems are aging and in need of significant repair and or replacement, in particular to support the type of community that we've been tasked with creating. So a lot of assessment has been done as part of the environmental process. We continue to evaluate these systems. We're continuing to identify future needs and assessing what we anticipate the cost of those needs to be, and thinking about how we're going to go about paying for those. So our team is working very closely with the VA to identify what those extraordinary infrastructure needs are that will be required to support the North Campus community. And we're working actively with the VA to identify funding sources that could potentially include some VA funding to cover those extraordinary items that would not be ordinarily incurred in a customary affordable housing development. So in particular, we're focused on really identifying what are those upfront immediate infrastructure needs to really kick off development activity on the North Campus. And ultimately our goal is to really address those infrastructure needs in a manner that doesn't delay the production of housing, but also that keeps the long-term view in mind, right? And making long-term investments that will support this community over the long run and not require reinvestment in 10 or 20 years. So that's really been our MO. It's an increasingly important piece of the work that we've been tasked with. I want to take a moment and speak a little bit about outreach and engagement. This is important to us. As part of our RFQ proposal, our team secured more than 20 different support letters from elected officials, local stakeholder organizations, and others. And that same spirit of outreach that we employed in our proposal process, we are going to bring to bear in our planning and development activities on the North Campus. We really believe that a successful community demands the input of both current residents, future residents, surrounding communities, other important VA stakeholders, in that the diversity of those stakeholder voices need to be heard to really provide for the best environment. I think the good news is that we're not starting from scratch. A wealth of input has been secured as part of the original draft master plan process. I think there were a record number of entries in the Federal Register as part of that process, and so following the publication of the Record of Decision, or the ROD, our plan is to really build on that outreach effort and to seek feedback on elements of our community planning and our thinking that includes items such as veteran population, housing type, amenities, connectivity, service needs, and more. And so there's more to be, more to come on that front. So as part of that outreach, obviously we will look to this board as a critical source of feedback and input into our planning process, and we look forward to engaging with you. We also plan to connect with VSOs, local electeds, VA staff, right? There are 5,000 VA staff that work here in West LA that have an important voice in terms of the operations on the North Campus, veterans themselves, and obviously adjacent community groups, and other operators and license holders on the North Campus, groups that are operating there today, including other EULSEs and groups like New Directions, CalVet, et cetera.
Good morning, everyone. My name is DARRYL Vincent. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of US Vets, pinch hitting for Steve Peck, who's the CEO of US Vets. So if you're expecting to see Steve, I'm the miniature version of Steve. Basically, before I get into the breadth of the presentation, we want to talk about the population we're going to serve, and they briefly talked about how the point-in-time count, obviously in LA, was discouraging in terms of overall population, and veterans staying kind of stagnant. What that tells us, obviously, is that what we're doing is working, but we need to be more preventive and also need to have more affordable housing for people to stay and sustain that success. So when we talk about this project, the main goal is to say, well, who are we going to be serving in this? And literally, we're going to be serving every subpopulation you could think of when it comes to the veterans that qualify for permanent housing. And that includes, but is not limited to, the senior veterans, disabled veterans, veteran families, as well as chronically homeless and those that have military sexual trauma. So our job is to have a comprehensive approach to make sure that we're reaching every type of population that will be in need of that type of service. A lot of times when we talk about developing any kind of project, people speak to veteran inclusion. When US Vets and our collective get together to talk about what we're going to do about this, the reality is that we need to ensure when we say veteran inclusion, it really means that. And what that means is we just don't give things from the prescriptive nature. That means that we do things that need to be done by assessing what the veteran needs. US Vets has a long history of not just saying what they want, but also describing actually them telling us what they need. The only way you can do that is by listening. The only way you can do that is by partnering. And when we partner, we make sure that we assess those needs and then can come up with a menu of things that can supply those needs. That includes community inclusions, because we want to talk about not only how we measure success, but more importantly, how we get there. We do not pretend to be the only experts in this category or when it comes to service delivery. We're just one of many experts that we feel that can contribute to the overall concept of what to have a successful project. Therefore, if someone else is doing something as good or even better or has a different specialty, we want to invite community inclusion to be able to tell us and to partner with us on how we can better serve the veterans. Now, when we do that, we're able to do that through two practices, our theory of practice and our theory for practice. And if the clinicians out there, we're talking about theory of practice is our overarching theme of what we do and how we serve veterans. And the theory for practice is actually how we put that into practical application. The different things that we're talking about in there is solution focus, strength based. Most importantly on that list you will see is trauma-informed care. And that's a way of looking at an individual, not asking what's wrong with them, but saying what has happened to them, and start treating from that perspective. And that changed the whole dynamic of how you look at an individual. Many times when you address homelessness, we went to the Housing First movement a long time ago. I think the best way to look at it, the way I describe it, is housing is solving the acute issue. It's equivalent of bleeding and stopping the bleeding, but then there's some internal things that have to be done for long-term success. So it's easy to say, let's put people into housing, and while it's not easy to do because you have to build it, it is easy to say put them in there. But what happens once a person gets there is more important to me, to ensure that they have the proper services and community inclusion from the community, from the service providers, to ensure that they can sustain success. The way we do that in our collective is to make sure we have service-enriched housing. This includes building up a therapeutic community that you may or may have not heard of, but let me clarify when I say therapeutic community in the true sense of the word. The true sense of the word is this community is for the veterans and is for them and done with them, not to them. What that means is they are empowered to own their own community. That means they're working side by side with staff to ensure that this is not just a house, but this is their home. And this place that they can call their own. We do this by making sure we give responsibilities. We set up a veteran council. And when I say veteran council, a council is not someone that just advises us from the outside. We actually have meetings where veterans come to our meeting at the beginning of the meetings, express their concerns with solution. They excuse themselves so we can do the staff portion of the meeting, but they are a part of our meetings when it comes to doing things that are solving problems in our community. We just don't say, here's the classes you have to go to. That's equivalent of having someone that doesn't have an alcohol problem and tell them to go to AA. Well, what sense does that make? It makes more sense to prescribe or to subscribe to what they need and what they want, not just have a menu of a cookie cutter approach. Some veterans may need money classes, some may not. Some may need to have safety support, some may not. It is our job to address this on an individual basis and to be inclusive in how we do that. We also want to recognize the success. So many times, people come from the model of, if you don't hear from me, everything's going okay. Even from our bosses. When the reality is that it's up to us to also tell people when things are going well. And that's the true sign of making sure people can feel built up and build the strengths. Because a lot of times we come from a deficit-based approach of trying to fix everything that's wrong, rather than taking a look at what people's strengths are and maximizing that so they can sustain their housing. Then, veteran inclusion, community inclusion, and then the staff, our job is the easy part, is to actually implement and facilitate all those solutions and working with the veteran to get it done. What that means is we try to make a case management ratio that is reasonable to live with so every veteran can get the individualized attention that he needs. We do tiered levels. Just because somebody needs to be seen only once a month, there may be somebody that needs to be seen every day. Again, that depends on the veteran. We have individual service plans, after-hour services, because believe it or not, most problems do not happen between 9 and 5. So when the residential community needs us, we need to make sure that we're there to be responsive, not when 5 o'clock when staff is off, because with the collective, we believe we're never off. We have a veteran service support specialist. What again this means is one of the best models we can practice is peer support. There's no better help that can come than from a person who's also experienced it. And that means they're helping them guide it. Believe it or not, sometimes navigating, I know you don't believe this, but sometimes navigating the services in the VA and other places can be complicated. Oh, that resonates with you? Okay. So what can we do to help them navigate that? Well, what's better is to have another veteran who has navigated it before, that can walk them through the steps, that can tell them where to go, where to check in, where to check out. So we implore that and make sure that this veteran is empowered. We call it the big brother, big sister concept, where somebody, when they first enter our program, usually we introduce them to somebody who's been probably in the same military service, can kind of relate to them, and their job is to cater to them and take them around and make sure that they're getting the things that they need. It is so much more empowering to come from them, so staff is merely facilitating the change that they're choosing to make. The beauty part about having us on board as well is we can leverage existing sources. As Brian and the team pointed out, we have a plethora of experience of working at a campus approach where VA is stationed with us. They are the #1 partner and our #1 funder when it comes to funding our per diem programs, as well as us having permanent supportive housing on the campus, where we work collaboratively together on who's coming in, who's going out, and the things that we need to do to sustain our success. So we already have the experience of working directly with the VA, hand in hand, to ensure that we can be on the same page about the things that we're doing. What we can't do, they do. What they do, we can't do. It's about leveraging our resources. That's including the fact that we have many grants that are operated through the VA, support of SSVF, support of service veterans families, the per diem program, the Department of Labor, the HVRP grant. All these things are already in our current campuses that we'll be leveraging at this campus as well. Now, all that sounds great, but if everything I just said to you was an output, those are the things that consider the hard work. We always tell our staff, I applaud and recognize hard work, where we reward outcomes. And outcomes are very important, and we want to make sure we give everyone in this community a return for their investment. So now, how do we measure success? We are blessed and or cursed that we are highly federally funded. It's a blessing because it's great to have contracts with the government because we need those much needed funds to serve veterans. It's a curse because we have to make sure that we do exactly what we said we're going to do by the letter of the law and the penny. So what does that mean? We are used to giving reports. We can report on everyone that's coming to the military and every single demographic you can think of. When we say demographics, this one time we were trying to track how many veterans were left-handed and how many were right-handed. Now I wanted to know what the reason was, but we did it. So the reason is that our reporting mechanisms are already integrated in the things that we're going to do. And we're going to make sure we track how many numbers to serve, the demographics, what branch of service, what military area they came from, how long they were in the military, what type of discharge. More importantly, we want to talk about permanent housing retention. If somebody enters the housing, how long do they stay in the housing, or do they move to another permanent housing setting? We are proud at US Vets in the Collective that we have about a 95 or 90% retention rate of people that move into our permanent housing, either stay with us or move to another permanent housing. And that's the sign of success, is sustained housing. We also want to talk about unit utilization. What is the sense of building a beautiful place if no one's going to live in it? We got to make sure the occupancy, and that has to do with, why do you want to measure that? Because you want to make sure you're not being too restrictive, that you're making sure you're bringing in the veterans that want to be served, that you're making sure that you're reaching those that it was meant to intend to serve. And we usually at our campuses run a 90% occupancy rate in all of our programs because we have an aggressive and assertive outreach program that goes out and meet veterans where they are. We don't wait for them to come knock on our door. And then obviously rent compliance, not just because the funds are needed to do the operating costs. What's more important about rent compliance is that a true sign of empowerment is when a person's able to pay their own way and contribute to what they're doing. The worst way to take away someone's dignity is to do for them what they could do for themselves. And we see veterans have so much pride in giving back into their community to make sure that they are part of the solution, not just part of the problem. So we also measure our success in rent compliance and ensuring people can pay their rent. That doesn't mean we leave them to their own. That just means that we make sure that we can help them do that and solidify that. How does that reporting go about? Well, we do these reports every week, and internally we do a monthly report that I submit to our boards and to our staff so they can see how they're doing. And then we usually roll it up into a monthly report of everything that we do so everybody can see it, and then usually on a quarterly basis we send it out to our funders that are requiring those reports. Those quarterly reports will talk about those certain metrics when it comes to this project, when it comes to permanent housing. The retention I talked about, the rent income, the utilization, the increasing their income or stabilizing their income. Those are the things that we report monthly, quarterly, and in our annual performance report, we would give every single demographic there possibly is on the veterans that have entered our project, and then measure those 4 salient issues to say this is the successes we could work on. We do this just as we do our surveys, not necessarily to be critical, but to be accountable and to learn. There's a difference. We give surveys to our veterans every year from an outside source and our stakeholders. They do an anonymous survey, and that gives us the feedback we know where we need to improve. After those surveys, the surveys are only good as the paper is written on if you're not going to do a follow-up with focus groups. Focus groups consist of staff along with veterans that sit in the room together for 3 months going over the thing that we scored low in and what are the solutions we can do with that. In the future, we also hope to partner with our college partners and do an evaluative process of how our services are working. One of the goals always is when someone gets put into permanent housing that we can stabilize them mentally and physically. As we know, sometimes when people are in homelessness, the emergency room becomes their primary care physician. The reality is we want to learn how to reduce that, not just for cost, that's one benefit, but because it's a better way of life. A lot of people on the streets just die from diabetes simply because they're not being treated on a day-to-day basis, and it shouldn't have to be done in an emergency room. So we're hoping and knowing that hopefully we can partner with an evaluation process and work with the VA for our outputs of making referrals. And I've heard it's a reasonable expectation to have the VA to work with us to make sure we get the outcomes of those populations that go into the hospital to get services. How much are we reducing them from doing the other things that are so much cost, that are not cost efficient. Measuring them against another group that may not be getting that services, and how we can prove the permanent housing program is working. This is just an example of a performance report, and we shrunk it down for the sake of time so you don't have to see the 10,000 pages. This is just one page that talks about how many bed nights we had in our program, our job placements, our counseling sessions, the meals served, how many obtained permanent housing, and then we have our matrix at the bottom that talks about our permanent housing report. We have that electronically. We can pass it out if anyone's interested. Myself, our two vice presidents will be able to send it to you. It's a lovely reading, so give yourself some time. And we'd love to pass that on to you if that's something that you'd like to see. Now, I like to end on this one note before I go to the next
Sir,
slide.
do you have time for a question on this
Sure.
slide? It's a lot about, John Hopper, it's a lot about quantity. Is there accompanying information about the quality of what's provided?
Yes, sir. So the quantity, we believe that the quality speaks to the success of how many people get the jobs and keep their jobs. We also do the quality when it comes to our surveys I spoke about. We have a survey that goes to not only our vendors and our veterans to talk about the quality of service that we're providing for those specific matrices. So how many people, for example, for job placement. Then we have the survey that's telling us how many people are satisfied with their job, they're moving forward in their job. Same thing with permanent housing. You obtain permanent housing, but let's talk about the quality of the service. Did your case manager meet with you? Did they give you the proper service that you need? Are you able to access the services you want? The same thing with outreach encounters. Quantity is, I saw 10 people, we're at least trying to say, if you get 10, 6 should be coming into housing. Now the next question is the quality of that service is asking the veterans who come in through the survey process, what is the quality of service? How was it when you engaged with them? Did they give you your immediate needs? A lot of times what a program will do, we'll bring people in and immediately start filling out 10,000 worth of paperwork, and really the veteran just is hungry. How about just give the veteran a meal first, and that's quality of service. If I feel like I've been treated like a human being and my eminent concerns were first taken on board before I started thinking about filling out 10,000 forms. So the quality is measured through our survey, sir, and constant feedback through our veteran council, constant feedback by veterans not on the outside of the meeting, but the inside of the meeting, and actually coming to our staff meetings where we sit and say, these are our concerns and these are our solutions. This is something that's not on the slide. But I wanted to say to everyone today that it always ceases to amaze me the amount of energy, focus, time, and I'm impressed with how much goes into such a project of this magnitude. And it is not lost on me that the board and the community want to make sure that they have the confidence in the people they've selected to provide and build this property, also going to have long-term standing success. We have committed ourselves before, and we commit today, that we're not here just for one-time help, but to build a home for lifetime care. We just don't want to build something some people can exist in. We want to make sure they can live. And we don't want to just call it a house. We want them to call it a home. We are very proud of all the relationships we have here with you, with our council, the people in the community. But it's never lost on me that the number one relationship is with the veterans themselves. U.S. Vets likes to say, serving those who serve, but today I like to use the word partner. We partner with our veterans because they are truly the experts in their life, and our job is to merely facilitate the success and give them the support so they can reach their goals. We partner with them because they had the courage to enter our program. They had the courage to put the uniform on, whether it be for one day or 30 years, they put the uniform on. We had the courage because they not only come to get help, they accepted our help. And they had the courage to share their journey with us. Not only about what they've done or where they've been, but to share and trust us about where they're going. And now they want to entrust us to embark on a new journey, hopefully in this housing facility. So as I look in the room, I see a lot of different ideas and thoughts are twinkling. People have a lot of questions. And what I think is, I consider that an interdisciplinary team. That means everyone has an expertise, everyone has a thought and idea, and whether we conflict on that idea or not doesn't matter. What matters is we're working towards the common goal. So it's a community project with community solutions. And whether you're standing at this podium or sitting in the audience, There's no one role more important than the other, just a different delegation of duty. Therefore, we should never dismiss a good idea simply because it didn't originate with us, and we should be more invested in getting it right than being right. And we are committed to be solution-focused, strength-based, and collaborative to hear all the ideas. So we just don't hear you, but we listen, feel, and put practical applications into place for sustained success. We have a golden opportunity, even though there's so many challenges, a golden opportunity to model for the veterans, staff, community, city, state, model for the nation of how we don't manage veteran homelessness, but we end veteran homelessness by this novel idea of affordable housing. That's all.
Mr. Shire.
Yeah, thank you. I could feel your guys' passion. It's a great presentation. I had a quick question, and this is the same question I had the last time that we were presented to by your guys' group, and that is around the population that will be served. This campus is much larger than just the 4,000 homeless veterans in Los Angeles, but the 400,000 veterans in Los Angeles. So that is the population that you will serve, is the 400,000, and that includes myself. And as you're thinking about community of inclusion, you must go much broader than a narrow focused around homelessness. This is a campus for all veterans, and that is the most neediest population, but they are a population of the entire whole. So I challenge you to focus larger and broader as you guys move forward.
Thank you.
Hi, Donna Deutschman for the record. First, addressing General Hopper's question, I believe that the data will be from both Century Housing and from US Vets. And when I look at some of the data collected that the gentleman was mentioning, I note that Century Housing has some of that quality data in their annual report, things like income growth, et cetera, and quality of life measures. So I just wanted to point that out, that perhaps some of the quality, things like how residents rate their quality of life, is on page 4 of Century Housing's report. And so I'm going to ask the question of both of you. Is it correct to assume that the outcome piece of this will become one combined report for the development here rather than 2 separate reports in the case of this community?
Donna, that's a great question, and I think the answer is yes. There will always be organization level reports because organizations are funded differently and have obligations to their funders and stakeholders. And this is a great segue to the next slide, and I wanted to share with you another example of a community-wide report, and the report that Donna is speaking to is, you all have a copy of it. It's our annual impact report for the villages at Cabrillo and Long Beach. For those of you that might not be familiar, it's a 27-acre community, former Navy housing site tied to shipyards, conveyed to our organization in the late 90s for the benefit of the homeless. So it's been 20 years of redevelopment. We now have a community of more than 1,500 formerly homeless individuals, families, including more than 650 veterans that reside at the villages. And really what we see our role there as is convening a wonderful assortment and collection of capable, gifted nonprofit and public agencies to deliver on and serve the needs of our community. That includes about a dozen agencies that are site-based, place-based, including the VA. The VA operates an outpatient clinic and also a treatment clinic within our community. But there are also more than 30 other organizations that provide additional services on more of a ad hoc or as needed basis. And so each of those organizations is distinct. They're separately managed, they're separately funded. But what we've managed to do, and it's taken us a number of years, but we now have a really good system in place, is figure out a way to get all those agencies to buy in, to share their data, so we can collect on an annual basis both output and outcome data, all of which is evaluated by a third party. It's actually a partnership we have with Cal State Long Beach, and analyzed and aggregated and published in the form of this report, this impact report. And so what this does is it tells the story of the whole, not just Century, not just US Vets. US Vets, incidentally, is our largest service provider of the villages, but all of the organizations, Catholic Charities, US Vets, the VA, American Indian Changing Spirits, 1736, etc. So all those agencies fill into this, and we report this out, and this has become a wonderful tool to tell the story of output, of impact and outcomes, but also identify quality of life measures and understanding where there may be deficiencies, understanding areas where we can improve. And so our intention is to, on the North Campus, there are existing organizations that operate there, right? You've got Shangri-La, you've got Blue Green, you've got Step Up, you've got New Directions, you've got Cal Vet, and all of a sudden you're introducing our organizations, the hope, and it will take time to get there. This is not easy. This took years of effort, but is to build trust, agree with one another about the importance of telling the story of the whole as opposed to this piecemeal approach, and get everyone bought into this idea of a campus-wide impact report for the North Campus. So that is the goal. It will take time to do that.
And I apologize, but one more question before you go on to your last slide, Donna Deutschman, for the record. I want to make a note, and Linda Davis, just for those veterans who weren't here last time and didn't get to see her in action, there was a veteran who came in and had an immediate need, and I've never seen, you can talk about what the VA does in the mega cloud of ideas, and then you see it in action when somebody has an actual need walking in, and Linda sprung into action, and nothing was more important than that individual veteran at that individual moment. And that's how you really judge what people are doing and what they're committed to. And so I know that they have a very strong care management team here as well. So if you know, and maybe you don't yet, but maybe with this slide, if you could also talk about how this care management group at US Vets and Linda Davis's group would interact and coordinate. I think that would be, because they're just spectacular here.
I would probably have to defer to the US Vets team to speak about that, but the bottom line is there needs to be partnership with the VA. The VA is actually the lead provider. I mean, there are an abundance of services and programs that we have to leverage. We've got to take advantage of that on the North Campus. So that is the goal.
This is Linda Davis. Donna, thank you. It's a team effort. I met a great vet chaplain on the way in here who wants to volunteer to do mental health and suicide prevention outreach out in the valley. And you just, we all keep our eyes and our ears open, and we meet the source of the solution every single day that are here. So let me just piggyback onto what Jeff and Donna have mentioned, in that we have a very well-developed, intentional process of listening to the voice, as I said, and surveying in real time that's being used here in the hospital, but it's also community-based. So I want to ensure that projects like these that are so critical, not only to the locale, but also to learning these lessons, that we engage what we call now our C signals, our community engagement, real-time surveying, our focus group execution, also our metrics, to the point of we not only want a combined, report on the metrics, which I respect that you're doing, and value that information, but we want to tie it back to the overall metrics we're also using at VA overall, so that we can assure together we're doing the best possible. So my commitment is to work closely with you all to make sure, as you're developing this with our partners, because we've got the partners across the country, and we want to make sure we're learning for everybody's benefit, but we're holding ourselves accountable too. So we'll work on it.
Thank you, and I totally agree, Dr. Davis, and our intention is not to reinvent the wheel here. At the villages, we rely in part on shared metrics that were already collecting and reporting to HUD on in terms of the HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System. And so it's together as a community agreeing on how do we want to evaluate ourselves? How are we going to measure success? Establishing those measures and then creating a system to collect and report on those.
And not just agreeing in the community, sorry.
Not just agreeing in the community, because there are overarching federal requirements for reporting too. To meet congressional intent back there, and also to make sure that we're meeting the standard metrics. And so we'll make sure we work with you closely on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we want to transition to the building.
We have
207
a
update.
couple more questions, if you don't mind. Rob first, and then Joe.
Thanks, Rob Beckman for the record. So Brian, at the very beginning of your presentation, you flagged something that I think is important for us to keep tracking as a board. You identified that there's the possibility that the traditional financing for affordable housing can't pay for some infrastructure. One of the things that we as a board are really focused on is the urgency of getting this project done. So I guess I would ask two things. The first is, to the extent that you're talking to the VA management about this issue, please make sure that your conversations are as detailed as possible. So we need to know, the VA needs to know what's the infrastructure needed for 1,200 units, and within that 1,200, the phasing. And if it's going to be delayed, we will want to hear that as a board, because it will cause us to perhaps think differently about what are interim measures we could take, such as temporary housing, to try to address the issue. Because I suspect you will find that not only me, but many other members of the board will feel a sense of urgency about it. So I would just encourage you to do very detailed reporting on that, both to the VA and to us.
Thank you. We will certainly take note of that. And at the conclusion of our presentation today, we've actually identified a number of areas and ways in which this important body, the VCOEB, can assist us. I got that question last time, so we've given some thought to that. We look forward to sharing that with you. I think we're going to transition to Tyler Monroe to provide an update on Building 207, and then we'll wrap our presentation.
One more question here.
No, okay.
Thanks, Brian. Just want to provide a brief update on our progress on Building 207, which is outside of the PEIS process. We're moving forward on it, full steam ahead. In March of 2019, we submitted an application to the City of Los Angeles for an allocation of HHH funds. In June of 2019, we also submitted an application for No Place Like Home and project-based vouchers to the County of Los Angeles and the Housing Authority of the County of Los Angeles. All three of those applications are currently pending. We're cautiously optimistic and hopeful that we'll learn something soon on the award of all of those. So that's what is really our critical path as it relates to the financing there. We've prepared our bond allocations. We're going to use what's called tax-exempt bond financing and low-income housing tax credits for Building 207. So that application has been prepared and is in our office, anxiously awaiting the results of the HHH, No Place Like Home, and project-based voucher applications, so that way we can immediately proceed with bond financing and tax credits. Our entire design team has been hired and engaged. That includes our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, structural engineer, civil engineer, landscape architect, acoustical consultants, green engineers, soils, geotech is all on board and are proceeding right now on the schematic design process, so we don't delay that process as we await the funding. We're hopeful again for a third quarter award of these funds, submitting in the fourth quarter of this year for our bonds and tax credits, with an anticipated or hopeful award of the tax credits and bonds in the first quarter of 2020, with the aim to get shovels in the ground in the third quarter of 2020. And again, this schedule has been entirely driven by the public funding applications at the local level, so both City of Los Angeles and County of Los Angeles. So that's what we're currently waiting on. As I mentioned, we have our design team engaged and are at the moment actually finishing up schematic design. And we also have our landscape architect that's beginning to figure out how the landscape for Building 207 is to be done, to support the residents, to support the community, but also how it might engage and interface
Brian DeAndrea again. So we wanted to take a moment to chat about what's next, speaking to some of the questions that we received. So once the record of decision is published, as I mentioned earlier, we intend to initiate an outreach process regarding the proposed implementation of the draft master plan. Tyler just spoke about Building 207, which is plowing ahead. We're hopeful of the funding applications. We will begin pre-development activities, working with the VA on the next phase or phases of development. We've obviously got to wait until the record of decision is made official and public. You know, and like we said earlier, our goal is to deliver as much housing as rapidly as possible. We do face constraints. There was a question earlier about funding. There are both limitations in terms of the soft funding that is available to us. This is funding from public agencies, city, county, state. The timing of that funding sometimes can be a challenge. Not all funding programs are on the same funding timetable. They are all separate. They're all competitive. Oftentimes funding programs are oversubscribed. We think this is a very compelling project, however, so we're optimistic of our ability to compete favorably for those funding sources. Also, funding sources typically build upon one another. So you secure one commitment, that commitment makes you more competitive, it allows you to leverage the next commitment, and you go through a process of building upon prior commitments. Obviously, there are existing operations on the North Campus that serve as a constraint in terms of existing VA operations that are in the process. We're talking to the VA about timing of when those operations will be relocated in the future. Things like, for instance, Building 300. And then infrastructure, and we spoke earlier about the infrastructure needs and really needing to address those upfront, immediate infrastructure needs. Speaking to ways this body, the Veterans Community Outreach and Engagement Board, can assist us. So as I alluded to earlier, we look forward to engaging with you in a really thorough and robust feedback session on our thoughts around the community plan following the publication of the ROD. We see this body as an important resource in terms of advocating for extraordinary infrastructure dollars, both internally and externally to the VA. We are open to feedback you have about how we can best engage with the public about our community planning process. And then I think we can also look to this board to assist us in telling the good story of transformation that is afoot here on the North Campus. Good things are happening. It's a wonderful story, and we need to continue to echo that across Los Angeles and the nation. And so I think with that, we'll conclude our presentation, and obviously we're available for any additional questions you might have.
Thank you again. This is a great presentation, and we're really excited. 2 years on the board. Today will be the last meeting I'll be here in person, and really excited that momentum has picked up over the 2 years. So you guys have a hard job in front of you, but good luck, and I know that you guys will be able to tackle it. The one thing I do want to say, though, as you guys go into this next phase, and this is coming from the CEO of Boeing, who went on to Ford to lead their transformation after they were in front of Congress and had to get bailed out. And I had the opportunity to see him speak at a conference a couple of years ago. And his thing was, when he went into Ford, one plan, simple plan, green, yellow, red plan, and make it okay to be yellow and red. Have one plan, change the culture here where we're aligned around the goal, and we're not just telling a positive story, but we're talking about what are the real issues and getting to resolution to drive things forward. That's the only way that we'll be able to really drive this program forward, and that's in collaboration with the VA here as well, and all of the community stakeholders. One plan and transparency around that plan.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to the board. Philip?
Well, first of all, just really appreciate the presentation and the themes that were sounded. I think for many of us who have sat on this board, and I'm sure for many of the people who attend these meetings, concerns about how this housing would be developed. Would it be simply housing, or would it be within the context of the idea of community, the theme of community, and the appropriate support services? So it was very rewarding to hear your presentations where those themes of community, consumer-centric, solution-based, those are the messages that we certainly want to hear about the development of that. housing, so I applaud you for that, the idea of neighborhood as well. That's all very good news to us. We're trying to monitor this as best we can and want to be supportive, of course, of the development of the housing for homeless people. I am aware, though, of situations where applications were made to the VA with a service provider and a developer, where even after the award was made based on that combination, as you have three, the VA intervened and displaced the service provider with its own staff. So I'm just concerned in this effort, because so much is dependent on the services and the service delivery here to make this successful. Is there a guarantee, ironclad, from the VA that your proposal and what was awarded to you will in fact, there will be no displacement of the service provider, specifically U.S. Vets? Is that a guarantee now from the VA they will not displace U.S. Vets? And even the hesitation makes me concerned.
No, I've deferred to the VA expert.
So the difficulty is in the laws around service procurement in the federal government. We've talked about the issue. Your question is extremely well taken. And we are trying to find a way to thread that needle so that we are not doing damage to the requirement of competitive procurement of service contracts, while also staying true to the notion that we asked for. We solicited a principal developer team that has a service provider as part of it. So I fully understand your question. I actually fully share your frustration, and we are looking at what our options are to ensure that we are both legally compliant and true to what we ask the principal developer to be and to do.
Also, from speaking from the service provider, and we are building in our development budget. DARRYL Vincent, Chief Operating Officer, U.S. Vets, we're building into our budgets currently service provision as well. A lot of times, as you know, services are put on the back burner when it comes to those type of things. Not with the VA in general, but I'm talking about in general, the development of it. But we're actually building in, and all of us as a collective are doing active seeking and have some promising prospects already of people that see what's being done, because I truly believe that we cannot isolate, but we have to integrate with the community. And I truly believe that the social sector and the private business has a moral obligation to contribute in the community in which they live. That means they must also contribute to this campus. And then sometimes as the development portion is being taken care of, we are soliciting to ensure that we have those services that sometimes get left off to be able to pay for that. I'll let the VA speak to the guarantee and the legal aspects of it. From our aspect, is we're gonna be there. And whether we're working with them together or whether we're working solo, we will be there.
So I appreciate that, and I think, what you just said, the nature of your presentation undoubtedly was a factor in the VA making the award to this triumvirate of organizations. So I don't know how the VA could contemplate separating an element of the proposal from the implementation. I think you'd have to go back and do an entirely new solicitation. So I just have concerns about that what we've heard today is so strong and compelling, and I have only great respect for U.S. Vets. I know the work that it's done, and of course the villages at Cabrillo are a national model, we all know that. But I'm just concerned that in some way, what I have seen previously from the VA, that displacement, not occur in this case, and I would hope that if there's any talk of that you would let this group know, because it would be so off-putting to have that occur yet again, and in any way delay what needs to move forward on this campus. So again, I appreciate what all of you have put together and the themes that you're sounding.
Donna Deutschman for the record. I couldn't be more strong than Philip, but I am about this issue, especially given that we were encouraged to go see the Cabrillo as an example of what this would be. It sort of obliterates all records of this committee and principal developer. But that being said, I was going to encourage strongly that some version, probably shortened but equally fantastic, of this PowerPoint be distributed to the public. Again, we've talked time and time again about keeping the veterans up to date about what's going on. And I think that distributing to the veterans in the community this information now, so that they can get as excited about what's happening and about how they're going to be reported out to, and what the data is that's going to be given to them about how services are changing lives of veterans, is a very important factor in the success of this project. And there certainly are donors out there who are veterans who've been very successful in their lives, who also will get behind this project. And there are people who will refer their homeless friends to this project on stills when they see how committed you are to changing lives.
Thank you. Letitia?
Just Leticia Machado, for the record. Just two comments, or one comment, one question. You referenced kind of some research about how to better serve, realize cost savings from having veterans not go to emergency rooms and things like that. So I just wanted to refer you to Department of Health Services research. They've been very successful in implementing this model, where they've actually, the Department of Health Services has permanent supportive housing facilities where they have co-located medical clinics, and they've been able to do this with savings they've realized by avoiding folks going into the emergency rooms and things like that. So they use their heavy utilizers of emergency room services are now being offered permanent housing. And so there's some reports that have been issued by the Department of Health Services in Alley County on their flexible subsidy housing pool. So I would refer you to that.
Thank you.
And then I also just kind of wanted to see if in the existing housing that if there's been any issues with VA staff delays. One of the things that's kind of been brought to our attention by the Housing Authority, who is now the Los Angeles Community Development Authority, is that there's delays in VA staff and their ability to lease up units with head bash vouchers, because I guess there's delays in VA staff being able to approve those units, and I don't know if there's any experience in being able to place veterans in housing. I'm getting more information on that, and hopefully we'll address it tomorrow again.
Yeah, that would be useful. Thanks.
Philip Mangano. One of the concerns I would have, and I know you've probably been thinking a lot about this, is inducing veterans to come and live on this campus. So do you see any impediments to that? Do you think the units will fill pretty rapidly once developed because of the community nature, or do you see some kind of campaign or marketing that will be necessary to induce veterans to come and live here? Because I think that has implications for the future of the campus and other housing that could be created here.
DARRYL, Vincent, U.S. Vets. So as many of our experiences in most of our programs, we have what we call a ramp-up plan, which we feel is based on history, need, and we're lucky enough that we're running enough campuses ourselves, not including the other providers we are partners with, that are already identified as needing permanent housing. The one thing that we find to be I don't want to say the easier part, but the less stressful part is having the need for the veteran, meaning the veteran themselves. The whole approach of outreach is done through the 3 tiers. There's one, obviously, the street outreach, as you know, where the people going out and making the first initial contact. The second tier for us is also the community providers, not thinking that we're the only one, because everyone's encountering veterans everywhere they go across the nation. And then obviously the third tier is marketing, which we've done in all of our markets before, of actually making people aware of something that's new. And we go out and make sure that we're making them aware of it. To answer your question more directly, is to say, no, we plan on ramping up on time as units become available. We pride ourselves as this organization, as a collective, and individually, that when the need is there, we fill the need. And we don't accept anything less than 90% of occupancy in all of our programs across the nation at any given night. So anytime we have to put that focus on, we leverage our resources and we go make sure we fill.
And I completely understand that. And I think the tension there, of course, is in one of your other themes, which is consumer-centric. Consumer makes the choice.
Yes, sir.
So veterans have to choose to live here. And that means they're choosing to live on this campus with some degree of isolation, though we know the metro is coming here and all of that. So I would just encourage you, based on housing that's been created specifically for homeless veterans, specifically for homeless people, and then the developers of that housing discovering that veterans or homeless people weren't choosing to live there. So I think marketing is an important element. Undoubtedly, you have a lot of experience doing that. I know you have a lot of different developments throughout the country, but I would certainly encourage you to be thinking, again, aggressively around that marketing process. I think coming to live here in a slightly isolated place may, with the tension of consumer choice being a part of it, that may be a bit more daunting than living at the villages of Cabrillo, for example.
This is Andrew Gross. Just also will reply to that. As an organization, we have over 6,000 units, and I think our standard of occupancy is also extremely, let's say, outstanding, since that was one of our strategies and principles. I think over those 6,000, we have 9 maybe units that are vacant, and so we also hold ourselves to a super high standard. That said, your point is understood. This is a different project. This is a different location. This is a different, population, and we definitely don't underestimate the work that's needed to work collaboratively with veterans to assure that with that choice that we are going to provide them something they choose. And so your point is really understood.
And that choice will require amenities, and amenities are a huge element of our plan. We also spoke earlier about clustering and concentrating activity, right, as opposed to creating isolated pockets of population on the North Campus, really focusing our efforts where the existing population is and building that sense of community, building it from inward and expanding outward, and really making this a place that veterans want to live, because there is connectivity, there are amenities, there is camaraderie, there are services.
Jeff Shear for the record. All right, this is my last time on the soapbox, I promise. But this is twofold. I guess it'll be a comment and a question. First off, I think that Johnson and Fang did a really nice job of painting a vision of what this can become here. So again, I challenge you to go back to that vision and report out how are we tracking to that aspirational goal. We also have the luxury of an upcoming major event in Los Angeles, and we should use that as the impetus for change here, the Olympics. And how great would it be to end veteran homelessness in Los Angeles by the time the Summer Olympics are here? So use that to your favor as well. And I think we're going to see this later in the public comment for the community, but we've all seen this over time. There's a range of points of view within the community. There's a bucket that I would call hardliners that go back to the original agreement in 1887, and then there's more progressives on the other end that are more open to the use of this campus. So as you're doing community engagement, you need to design with the community and gain consensus. That does not mean agreement. It means that we're all on the train headed in the same direction. So you do need to get consensus within that community and use the power of design and co-design with that community to be able to gain that consensus to move this forward, or else you will hit landmines the entire way.
Hi, Megan Flans. Just wondered if maybe, Brian, you and the team on the question about how do we ensure that this community is a place that veterans choose to live. Do you want to talk a little bit about the conversations we've been having about naming and branding the community and how you intend to approach that?
Sure. So communities need names, and I don't know that West LA VA is necessarily the most compelling name. And so as part of our outreach process, our intention is to engage with the public, with our veterans, with stakeholders, VSOs, to really think about how we might name this community. Looking back at the history, looking back at the people, looking at the real estate itself. It's a very special piece of real estate, and using all that inspiration to arrive at a concept that we all feel good about and that will be inspiring and will make people, want to know what's happening there, and what do I need to do to live there. And so it's essentially a branding exercise. And I don't mean to say that it's not a shallow exercise, but we do have to essentially rebrand this real estate that's essentially sat fallow for many decades and is in great need of transformation.
And do it collaboratively.
Exactly, and as Andrew says, that will be a collaborative process. That's not going to be us huddling up in a closet coming up with a great name. This is a shared asset in Los Angeles, and it does need to be a inclusive, collaborative process.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, very good. Okay, any more from the board? Okay, gentlemen, thanks very much for your presentation. We do appreciate it. We've been looking forward to it.